Hello and welcome to the Open Talent Report. This is the podcast where we discuss the emerging trends in labour law, employment law, independent work and the gig economy, which many organisations are wrestling with due to the growth of the open talent and gig economy. I'm your host, Connor and Indy. When I'm not presenting the podcast, I'm the MD at CXC Global, EMEA, which compliantly connects talent and opportunity. Hello and welcome to this week's show, where I'm delighted to welcome Indy Gregg, who is the CEO and founder of Wedo. Indy, delighted to have you on the show. How are you keeping today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Connor.
Well, it's bloody great to have you on, Indy. So thanks so much for joining us today. So, Indy, what's your background? What's the pop quiz version of Indy, and how did you become the CEO and founder of Wedo?
The pop quiz version of me. I moved to Europe after I did my studies in around 1993 and raised a family, had 3 children. And at the time I was working on digital delivery services, so building some of the early websites for people and doing digital artwork and raising kids in the south of France. And then I got a record deal at one point. My husband had left me. He dumped me. So I decided, as you do, I'd just go try to be a rock star with 3 small kids. Yeah, it's like, I'll get you back. No, I'm kidding. No, but I was just like, okay, I'll go be a rock star, just like it was any old thing, like any type of job I was going to get. And I ended up writing some songs and got a record deal and got to do that and brought my kids along, and they were young enough that they could travel with me a lot. And it was really fun. And from that, I learned a lot about the recording industry, and specifically, how labels and how music industry was working and not working at the time, because this new thing called the MP3 was destroying apparently their lives, and got in a big fight with the pirates, and decided to launch my own platform. So we launched a platform called Kertunes, and I grew that into 14.5 million users, somewhere around there. And I'd flown around and seen all the labels, got them onboarded, a lot of them, and built out this massive community of publishers, managers. It was kind of one of these first early music marketplaces back then. And so did that for a while. We had the economic crash. Our model was based on advertising. Unexpectedly, when the long tail of advertising and you were getting impression rates pretty high. And yeah, so we sold off some of the technology, and I started a new company called Groove and sold cosmetics. Developed a nail care system during the recession, because during recessions, beauty is always a good place to go. And we still spend a lot of money on beauty. So, and that was very successful. We sold millions of units in the first year, and we couldn't even keep up with the supply. I learned a lot about importing goods and everything to do with, calculating container costs and moving product at that time. And we did a lot of sales on these, deal sites like Groupon and Voucher and stuff. And then I got bored with that after about 5 years. We kept on, that company's still alive today. Kept with it for quite some time. But I decided I really wanted to get back to technology. So in my free time, I started consulting and becoming a kind of a fractional freelancer for startups, and did that for several years, about 8 years, 9 years. And it occurred to me after doing 10,000 hours on Upwork and some of these other platforms that there needed to be a new solution, because the J curve in the market is so steep. Half the global workforce is moving into the type of work I just spent the last decade doing, and decided to build Wedo in order to help kind of revolutionize the way we work. Most of us developers and artists and people like me have been working from home for quite some time, and I think it's a shift in the workforce. And obviously, the catalyst to that was COVID, but I think we are already on that trend anyway. it just kind of accelerated that quite a bit. So that's really what brought me here.
Wow. I tell you what, Indy, I don't often curse on the podcast, but holy shit, that was probably the best pop quiz and the most varied pop quiz answer we've had to date. So that's quite the journey. I wish I could unpack some of that more, right? But maybe we could get a second episode in relation to that, Indy. But I suppose key takeaways for me. Hopefully, you burnt your husband and he rues his mistakes. And two, would you mind, just for the benefit of our listeners, Indy, just explaining a bit more about the problems and challenges that Wedo solves for?
Absolutely. So Wedo is a freelancer independent marketplace at its core. And the problems we solve are the piecing together of software in order to bring your client from the point of you meeting them all the way through to taking that payment and issuing those invoices. So a typical scenario of how you would use the app, if you're a freelancer, is you would onboard your client, you'd have a call, and you can set up your contract and your invoice straight on that call. So, and you can automate that and set milestones or whichever type of contract that you have selected. So we do milestone contracts, hourly contracts, monthly subscriptions, or retainer contracts. And then a pay-as-you-go type style of agreement between you and your client. So you can set that up, you can automate that so that payments are made on time and you're not chasing payments. And it's good for you, it's good for the client. It's also a way to onboard someone quicker than you probably naturally would. So there's no gap. You want to get your client while they're hot. And we do that by providing 4K video. So you can do a one-to-one and serve your client on a video call, take that payment, and we issue you a debit card and a Wedo account, and the money flows directly into your account, commission free, and you can move that money anywhere you want to. It's an IBAN debit account, and so we process payments essentially in the back end, and we're a neobanking application. And for the client, the same thing. You can go and hunt and look for the freelancer, the contractor you want to hire. But on the client side, you can run teams. So you can actually, if you're a startup and you want to hire people, you can run teams and manage groups within the application as well. So it's a double-sided marketplace. We'll probably open it up to more opportunities in terms of lending and mortgages and other financial services in the future. But that's where we've started so far.
Wow, Indy, I think you're solving a lot of big problems for independent workers, but also for the end clients. And I agree with your analysis, Indy. Approximately, roughly 50% of workers are likely to be some form of independent contractor, freelancer, or temporary worker. And it strikes me that in many cases, in many countries, a lot of those workers are essentially disenfranchised from mainline banks, right? From mainline basic things that a full time employee can get, such as a mortgage. Relatively straightforward. Of course, there's some problems out there at the moment in terms of getting mortgages, right? But over the last, let's say, 10 to 15-year period, car loans, leasing agreements, home improvement loans. The list goes on and on and on. And I suppose my question really is, do you agree with that hypothesis? And then two, what can companies or platforms such as yours do to solve that particular issue or problem?
So definitely consultants and freelancers, anyone who isn't employed or they're self-employed, uh, haven't been able to leverage financial services as easily as an employee has been able to do in the past. It's a strange one, that, because when you're an employee of a company, all your eggs are in one basket. Whereas if you're a contractor, ultimately you have multiple streams of revenue. So you would think that that would be the more secure environment in order to get a bank loan or a mortgage or whatever. And I think that's going to change. So I totally agree with you. I think that in terms of what we do is we're interested in working with insurance companies and partners, and we'll be launching some lending services ourselves. Probably not in the mortgage range for quite some time, but one of the reasons why this is an issue is contractors maintaining proper accounting for their businesses. And what I mean by that is, more often than not, they're using their own personal bank account and for quite some time. They don't really turn it into a proper business, and they're not really looking after it in the same way as a small business would a lot of times. And that might be part of the issue. And I think that's changing as well. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does, Indy, and thanks for shining some light on that. The other thing, Indy, that strikes me about, let's say, talent marketplaces, to use a generic term, is if you look at companies such as Upwork, Fiverr, People Per Hour, TaskRabbit, the list goes on. I know there's some similarities and there's some obvious differences, but I think the top four, top five
Mhm.
marketplaces globally. But when I read a lot of the research, particularly from the International Labour Organization, what often strikes me is the low utilization of workers on those platforms. And if I can explain it this way, let's say freelancer.com have circa 90 million workers on their platform. At any one time, there's less than 10% actively engaged or utilized. And I suppose my question is, how does your platform solve for that particular issue?
Well, I think one of the major issues with those platforms is that they take really high commissions. And so the first thing that you are tempted to do as a freelancer is move your client away from there and go off the platform so that you're not paying 20% or 10%, depending on the hike. For example, I think it's Upwork that does, I think, 20% on the first $500 you make and 10% on the first $10,000 you make per client.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
they continually, it's a cash cow. But not only that is they make you pay a subscription to join to go and fish for your clients. So that's your lead gen. But on the back end of that, they're also taking sometimes 20%. And on top of that, they generally hold your money for a number of days and then make you pay to have them deposit your money into your own account after you've done the work. And I think that system is pretty fat middleman in 2022. It's not necessary. So removing that commission based model and allowing people to transact without taking heavy commissions, or in our case, we don't take a commission at all. We monetize through the transaction fee on the client side, and it's a small transaction fee. It's 2.9% and 30 cents for the platform use, and we also monetize through the banking and the deployment of the capital. So when you make money and you exchange it into foreign currencies, or if you deploy your money in a shop, we make money on the interchange. And then we have a SaaS model on top of that where we charge a monthly fee for extra perks in your portfolio or things that you show on your actual profile, as well as added time and video and audio conferencing. And then for bigger players who have bigger audiences, you can actually grow a community around your product or service. So that same audio video platform can serve the masses. So we do 15 hosts on a video call in 4K, and you can serve up to 1 million listeners or viewers per what we call alleys. And you can use that as a big marketing tool to grow your audience and maintain relationships with them, because there's a chat that's a piece of that. And as a business or a freelancer or a business or a coach who might use that platform, or a musician, it's a direct exchange with your audience. So you have them. You have them, they're yours. You have their phone number through the app. They're connected to you. You can chat with them. You can share files, share media, and share the things that you want to share in a more intimate space, and charge a subscription for that. So It's all integrated into the same video and audio platform, so the whole payment processing is the same. It's just a different use case.
So, in the simple question for me, do you think companies such as Upwork and Fiverr and People Per Hour, do you think they're there for the taking in terms of they're the incumbents? They're almost, I wouldn't say legacy now, right? That's probably a bit stronger word, but let's say they're the incumbent marketplace players and freelancer.com. Do you think they're there for the taking in terms of you guys taking their market share, at least chipping away at it?
We certainly want to go after some of that market share. I think as a freelancer, it's in your interest to be on multiple platforms in any case. And the thing is the market is so huge that there's room for more players and there's room for more very large players. We're quite a bit different though than your traditional let's match people up and, you know, create a lead gen kind of vibe, in the sense that we're the place where if you go and you get your lead gen from Upwork, let's say, you can go grab that client. You still need a place to actually serve that client and store those files and actually interact with them. And some of these platforms make it very difficult for you to do that outside of their platform. In any case, they have all these circumvention rules, and the reason for that is because if you circumvent, then they lose their 20%, right? So, but we are building features that are more helpful to the actual business and freelancer themselves, and we're kind of hybrid. Um, in a funny way, sites like Upwork they prefer the client more than they do the freelancer, and so the bulk or the majority of the money they make comes from the freelancer side rather than the client side, which is totally fine. But for us, we're catering towards businesses who really run their teams online and work online and really want to grow a community around and communicate with maybe other freelancers and be part of their industry or their niche and have that open space to be able to do that. So we're more of a community application, whereas Fiverr and Upwork do everything they can to stop people from creating community in reality.
I love your view on this, Indy. This is why I'm delighted to have you on the show. And Indy, with regards to your platform and the communities that I guess it spawns, I can't think of a better word. Are you guys working with the large enterprise space yet? And is that part of your plan?
Our main plan is to partner with big networks. So yes, enterprise space, anyone who aggregates users or grows a niche or grows a following are who we are primarily partnering with. So what I mean by that is organizations like the freelancer networks. IPSI, for example, is a good one. They have 15,000 freelancers. So we've been partnering with them and sponsoring them. Big women's organizations, etc. In terms of enterprise level software, I think that's in our pipeline in the future, but it's not a big part of our aggregation plan at the moment. Although this is a B2B sales, but we're really targeting networks who we can process payment for, and they need infrastructure to better grow their communities and keep better touch within their communities, I guess, is really where we're focused.
Gotcha. And it's not a political show, Indy, so you'll please forgive my next question. But when I think about things like the so-called labor market paradox, which Bloomberg, Economist, Financial Times, New York Times have all described over the last 2 years, it strikes me that part of the reason for the labor shortage is demographics, COVID, people finding jobs that they actually want to do, demand for digital transformation. But to my mind, a lot of it seems to relate actually to a skills shortage in terms of our schools, universities, technical colleges, and university stroke colleges uh, aren't producing people that can do the jobs of today, and almost to my mind aren't producing people that can do the jobs of tomorrow and the future. And it strikes me that there's a structural issue there in terms of how we educate our people.
Mm.
What's your take on that view?
Wow. Okay, so there has been a huge structural shift in the way we act as humans over the last 2 decades. Um, the growth of the internet wasn't planned, and so we've got a little bit of a generation gap there. When you think about the workforce, so I think the structural shifts. It depends on gender, age, skills, income, the amount you want to be paid versus the types of jobs that are available to meet the growing demand of digital technology. And I think that's where you're seeing the biggest, gaps in the market. At the same time, the jobs that used to be there are being automated, and I think automation is actually, ironically, part of the solution in order for people to shift. And we're just not producing people fast enough. I mean, another part of this is probably people have less children, therefore the ones that are would have been born haven't been born. So that could be part of some of this shortage, but not really. When people are complaining about the jobs you know being unable to fill their jobs, I guess is a better way to phrase it. They're talking about specific types of jobs that we're short of. We don't have enough programmers. We don't have enough UI designers. We don't have enough, any number of things. So it's a tough one. The real solution, yes, it's partially education, but it's also there needs to be probably a more monumental universal shift in government uh, due to automation. I think we're moving into a knowledge-based workforce. And as we go forward, there won't be as many kind of menial jobs that sustained people in the past. It's kind of going to be more of a luxury as society in a lot of ways. Once we get past this kind of next decade, I think we'll probably go into a more knowledge-based economy. And it's going to be pretty cool for humans in general. Um, and we can see it already with the number of robotics and even Elon Musk's new Android that he's put out. I think that's where the future is, and that could replace jobs, but that doesn't mean it's going to replace the ability for humans to earn or to capitalize. It's just going to change.
I'd like to pick up on that later in the show if we could. And if we look back over the madness of the last 2 years during the COVID crisis and the shift to different ways of working, is there anything that's blown your mind in terms of how we work today on a general basis? And I guess we can exclude from that the so-called deskless workers, right? So the people that actually have to show up somewhere, whether it's a building site, a pub, a restaurant,
Yeah.
a production facility. I always am reluctant to talk about, knowledge, remote work for knowledge workers being the panacea because until robotics come along and replace all those other sectors that I've mentioned, right? There's still a category of society that, although we're talking about inclusion, that remote work can be more inclusionary. I guess it's only inclusionary for a specific cohort of society.
Mm.
So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, but my question is indeed, is there anything about the new way of working or world of work that has surprised you and that you welcome?
Yeah, well, I think that the popularity of the digital nomad is pretty cool. The ability to work from anywhere, anytime. Just going back to your point about kind of marginalization within the workforce, the accessibility. That's one of the problems that Wedo wants to solve. No matter where you are in the world right now, it's pretty clear that most people now have a mobile phone or have access to mobile phone technology. And so we believe you should be able to pick up any job or any task and be able to do that through technology or through an application like we do. And that means that we're democratizing that scenario so that I'll give you an example, Connor. Say that let's say you're in Dublin and I'm in France, and you're on the app and you put a notice out saying, hey, I want someone to go and look at this property. I'll pay you X amount of money if you can film this, live. on the app so I can have a look. I don't trust the real estate agent who's trying to sell me this idea that there's a hole in my roof. I don't know, right? So I go and I perform that task and you pay me. So real-time work, location-based, is going to be a thing. And that's going to fill in some of these gaps. And it's still remote work in terms of, you might not be working from home, but it's still a remote work setting that your client may be miles away and you're actually performing a task on location. I think we're going to see more and more of that. Very similar to the TaskRabbit idea, but more in real time. So you can pick up jobs as soon as you're made available. Uber is a great example of that. And there are many applications of that in other verticals, So that's a very interesting space. The digital nomad, the youngsters that are working a month in one country, the next country, kind of like hopping all over Europe and working, and you don't really know if you're their leader in the company where they are. You have the ability to do it. Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, I'm in Malta today. Oh, you made it's great. Like, didn't know you were in Malta. I just thought you were in Glasgow still, or whatever. So I think that's great. I think that's extraordinary to have that opportunity, because that certainly didn't exist when I was that age, and certainly didn't exist a few years ago, even, so much. So there's a big movement towards that. And I think we should encourage that, because experience is part of what we are here on the planet to enjoy, or to have as physical beings. So it's a great thing. But yeah, that's probably the coolest piece I've picked up on the last couple of years.
Yeah, like Indy, I'm totally with you on that, and I can think of some great examples even in our own team in my day job when I'm not producing and presenting the podcast, and it's bloody great. Um, I believe that the people should really be judged on in a work setting on their efficiency, effectiveness, and their contribution to the culture of the organization. Keeping that alive, passing it on to the next people that come in, and really flying the flag for that. That to me is incredibly important. And what I actually find interesting as well is how companies can create a really great culture in a digital first or remote first environment. And I wonder, Indy, is your organization set up like that? Is it distributed? Is it remote? Is it digital first? And are you proud of the culture that you and your team are creating?
We are digital first, and we have been since we started. We started Wedo in 2020 during the pandemic, and so we were forced to be remote, and so we ended up setting up policies, procedures, and processes, and and using platforms to help us. And it's gone really well for us. But we do get together often, so we have kind of a hybrid situation where we'll meet up every 4 or 5 weeks, and especially the leadership team. But then they'll meet up with their teams, and so we'll do these maybe 2 or 3 day sessions. A lot of times we do them in Spain, and everyone gets together and we work through new concepts, do a lot of whiteboarding, and it gives people the opportunity to get to know each other. Because when you're digital only, and you don't really understand someone else's sense of humor, you haven't been in a room with them, you haven't spent time
Yes.
with them, you can end up having conflicts. And I think that meeting face to face is always going to be important, and it breaks up the monotony of working from home or working alone. But we also do a lot of company meetings where we do breakouts and we hang out, and we might just sit and work and have coffee and have a laugh as if they were sitting next to us, just listening to the same music together or something like that. And I think it works. I think it's great. I think it saves people a lot of time and stress, unnecessary time and stress. It also means that you don't have to get dressed if you don't want to. Get up and make your coffee, brush your teeth, do your morning stand up in your pajamas, turn on your camera, say hi, and nobody cares because they're all doing the same thing as you are. So it removes I think it kind of keeps it real, in some ways. Like going to an office can be stressful for many people. What am I going to wear? Oh, my boss is going to be there today. I have to be very careful about whether I've dusted my shoulders off or my shoes, whatever. So I think it's brilliant, to be honest. I think it's a good thing all around. And more companies are missing out, because what I've found is if you're competing for talent and you're trying to find that talent within a close radius of where your offices are, you're never going to beat the competition because the talent's all over the world.
Yeah, I agree with that, Indy. And I also think there's potentially a further democratization piece there too. If not only can you find the talent elsewhere because the world's now a big place because of the remote movement, but also you've got the ability to help level up. So
Mhm.
if you look at Africa, for example, where the pay rates compared to United Kingdom and certainly when compared to USA for, let's say, IT developers, for example. And of course,
Mhm.
that's a broad range of skills there, right? But let's say Python or Java developers,
Mhm.
the delta between what a US Python developer and a Nigerian based Python developer are paid are, are normally quite striking. Right? There's a
Yeah.
huge disconnect. And I think the great thing about the rise of hiring anyone anywhere is that leveling up piece. Okay, you might not be able to pay the Python developer in Nigeria the same as the girl or guy in Silicon Valley, but if you can pay them maybe two-thirds, you're helping them level up in their country,
Mhm.
and then there's that redistribution effect. And in a way, you're still making money or saving money, but you're also righting a wrong. And there's something weirdly noble about that, in my view. Would you agree?
Well, I think emerging markets and accessibility um, to jobs, and vice versa. For, companies who are hiring abroad, like India, Bangladesh, parts of Africa, um, they it influences the company culture in a really positive way. The insights and the way that people solve problems from different continents and countries is incredibly um, beneficial to any company. And I think when you find great talents, doesn't matter where they are in the world, you're hiring them for their minds, for the way they view and solve problems, or um, create the products that you want to deliver to help people. So I think it's a great thing, and I think it's opening up a lot of opportunities in places where prior to the internet didn't really have anything to look forward to, and in terms of innovation, and that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm with you, Andy. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, Andy, is we talked about some of the structural problems that face freelancers. We talked about mainline banks and the way the financial services system is set up. But another structural constraint or barrier is around labour law and how
Mhm.
contractors are classified. And you're probably aware of the Biden administration's recent announcement in terms of really turning independent contractors into employees or some form of employee. And
Mm.
then I'm sure listeners are aware, and you're aware of the recent EU directive on platform workers, where by in short, those workers within certain criteria are presumed to be employees, and the platform has to really prove that they're independent contractors.
Mhm.
Does that concern you as a platform or community, Indy? And do you think governments need to move towards almost one standard of what truly an independent contractor is?
Okay, so well, while that was happening, that the UK repealed some of the directives from, I think, IR 35 in 2017. They repealed. So there's a lot of movement in this space. I can see why, uh, the governments are wanting to declare people employed. At the same time, the solution for a contractor is just to set up a company. and then you're not a contractor anymore. You can employ yourself, within your own company. It just means you're a solo independent rather than building a team in a new company. And there's really not many disadvantages to doing that. So I think there's always a workaround. I don't understand it, because we know that this is the reality, that more and more companies are hiring independent contractors, essentially so that they don't need to pay all of the extra cost and contributions for as many workers. And sometimes that works very, very well for young startups or new businesses in the first, at least 4 or 5 years, until you're very steady. And so I think governments pushing back on that are actually hurting the growth of new startup success. And I think that's wrong. So I think they need to find other solutions, rather than just telling people what to do. That you have to become an employee because let's face it, most portfolio careers, they may be with a company for 1 or 2 years until that company scales, or sometimes people come in and they work with a company from scale to the next whatever, to IPO, whatever that is, as a contractor. And so government stipulating that person running their business is, um, when they know it's, there's only a specific time frame for when a project is going to start, when it will end, and that's what contracting is. So I don't see, I don't even see how the European, for example, in Germany, how they can enforce that upon people. I think it's unruly for them to even try to do that. That's my opinion. But
I like
does it
it.
disturb me? No, because there's going to be freelancers and contractors, no matter what the government says. They'll just want to. If you don't have, I think the rule is, for example, in Germany, if you don't have at least 3 companies who you're invoicing each month, then you're really an employee, and and you shouldn't be contracting. I mean, it's stupid. So you can just go create 2 logos for 2 other people each month, and that means that you're no longer, you know, forced to be an employee. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting that the weird world of German labour and employment law, and aligned to that the weird world of EU directives. But it's interesting though how the law of unintended consequences can potentially really disrupt in a
Mhm,
negative fashion a
mhm,
particular segment of the economy, which is sorry, the platform economy. So, I guess I'm really interested to see where this is going to go, and will it have a negative impact on platforms? My guess is probably will. But to your point, I'm sure there's ways to compliantly mitigate those risks and issues that you've mentioned. So,
mhm,
thanks for sharing your views on that. Really appreciate it. Want to look at automation, India, if we may. We touched on it briefly during our conversation earlier, and I really wanted to ask you: are you concerned about automation's impact on jobs, and specifically jobs displacement? And do you feel that we can create enough new and interesting jobs to replace those who have been displaced?
Yeah, I think that, necessity is the mother of invention, and the reason why automation exists is we need it. The world's not getting smaller. It may start to retract, once we hit, I don't know what the figure is, 10 billion or 15 billion or something like that. But in reality, we need automation in order to produce enough food, enough clothing, enough of everything in order to sustain the globe. And so, no, and I think on top of it, automation actually produces jobs. And that seems like it seems like it's a paradox, but it actually does produce more jobs and creates more space for more innovation, and that in turn creates more jobs. And so, computing technology has created more job scope than anything else in the history. I think of of human beings that I can think of, and therefore I think we're in a really golden age, where jobs are going to be more and more prolific, and more people will have more affluent lives and be able to afford more and more bespoke um, bespoke and maybe cultured or cultivated or however you call that services. And we're seeing that already in this massive hike in the coaching industry. Everybody's got a coach now, right? And everybody's got a coach, right? You know, you can coach for astral like meditation, and then you can get a coach for, I don't know, Reiki, power, whatever. Like, there's loads of things. I can't tell you how many people who are coaches come to me each week on LinkedIn pitching me their coaching services. You know, they have very specific um, niche problems that they solve for people. You know, so I don't think we're going to have any shortage due to automation, and there's no chance.
Interesting, Indy. I love your optimistic outlook on this particular topic. The other thing is, it sounds like someone should set up a platform for coaches as well. It could be.
Well, we built, we just built that in since there's so many of them.
Go for it. You got a business there, Indy. I love it already. Um,
They're part of the target market. We're good. We're good.
Got it. Good stuff, Indy. So, Indy, just want to touch briefly. You've been a multiple founder and co-founder, and over the course of your career, and as we discussed at the outset, my God, you've got such a varied and really, I suppose, fascinating career. I have to say, but being being in the technology sector and having a platform that spawns and builds community and it's transacting with banks, and you've got neobank, and you've got so many cool things within your platform. And I suppose you've had to work with VCs and PEs, and I think last year, 2021, was the best year ever for investments in HR technology. I think there was about 12 billion,
Mm.
roughly 12 billion invested last year. This year it's looking a bit less. It's about just under 9 billion year to date, and I don't think it'll top it unless there's some blockbusters. But do you feel that a lot of the platforms that have secured investment and are securing investment are part of a bubble, or do you think it's not as simple as that, and there's some really good innovations coming into the marketplace that are raising money at decent valuations?
I think that there's definitely a bubble across the board in terms of valuations last year, and I think that this kind of holding off on investment over the last 6 months, and we saw the reports on VC investments pretty much across the board. It was like a desert this year, and I think that's just them wanting to adjust the market more than anything because the valuations were getting ridiculous, and so yeah, it's a bubble, but not in the sense that there hasn't been great technology coming through, because there is, and there will continue to be. The global employment market is like $9 trillion. It's one of the biggest markets out there because everyone's employed. So HR technology is going to be necessary, and innovating in that space is going to be more and more necessary, especially as we are deploying our teams across multiple borders. Um, and the freelance and gig economy is huge as well. It's a $2 trillion market. So there's a lot of uh, it's necessary, like to invest and to continue innovating in those spaces. But yeah, I think valuations definitely needed to be adjusted. It's also fear for the market going forward. There's a lot of uncertainty right now in markets, and that will adjust. And I think VCs right now are sitting on a lot of dry powder. They're probably going to be deploying. Have to deploy. You can't just hand the money back to your LPs and say, "Oh, sorry, we can assign you money," or "No, the market's too rough." It's a paradox as well. Because you cause problems in the future if you're not deploying in the past, basically. So we'll see what that looks like in the next couple months. So.
I think I've spoken to a lot of founders recently, and then they've been saying the same thing, that the VCs, they've got the cash, but they're sitting tight, but they can only sit for too long. And I guess there's probably going to be some bargains to be had next year as well,
Mm.
when companies are going out to raise cash, for sure. But do you think that phrases like burn rate will be consigned to the dustbin of history, or do you think that's just a temporary blip given the pretty torturous year it's been for technology startups?
Phrases like what? Sorry, I didn't hear you correctly.
Oh, sorry. Phrases such as the burn rate, right, or this burning cash, right, where it was almost seen as a badge of honor to burn your way through as much cash as possible, right, without
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
either winning market share or being profitable. Do you think that will be consigned in phrases like that to the dustbin of history?
Mm, no, because markets always fluctuate, don't they? Um, there's always a time when you want to deploy fast, and there's always a time when you need to slow down and extend, right? So this isn't something new, is it? I mean, it's cyclical. Economists are saying this very much similar. Some people are talking about the 20s. Some people are talking about 1974 or post-war versus 1974. It feels like it's probably more like 1974. Um, but it's always markets always have fluctuated. You're faced with either a bear or a bull market, and you play against the market. And startups need to learn, and businesses raising capital need to learn that you take the money from the market when it's available and not when it's dry. you know so, so,
I think I think that's a lovely piece of advice, and there's a beautiful actual simplicity in that, Indy. So thanks for sharing that with me and our listeners. Indy, I'd like to finish with a question that we ask all of our guests. Really simple one. What, in your view, is in store for the future of work?
how far into the future?
It's your answer, Indy. So you can go long, as they say, or you can go short. It's
Okay,
your
so
call.
from my point of view, the future of work is going to be based on uh, a lot of fractional work. I think that there'll be a death to the 9 to 5, 40 hour a week or 35-hour a week. There'll be a lot more freedom and flexibility throughout your lifetime. In other words, just because you went to university to be an engineer doesn't mean you're not going to be an underwater, you know, explorer or basket weaver or astronaut or whatever in the future. You'll probably have 5 or 6 at least different vocations and maybe in different verticals going forward. So this generation that's just graduating, I believe that's what they'll be looking forward to, learning and adapting to new innovations and new environments is going to be more and more important moving forward if we have a planet in any case in the future. But um, even if the environment and everything is hunky-dory and perfect, people will need to learn and adapt and move through a lot of different cycles and verticals. And I think that the most important thing we can do in education is not train them for jobs that exist today, but to train them to learn and to explore and to become adaptable, because adaptable people are going to be the most successful in terms of socioeconomic situations going forward. And then, yeah, I think that more people will be working less in the future. In other words, you're going to have more time to innovate and be creative as we move forward with automation, and the cost of living will go down eventually over time. And that's the world we want to build, and I think that's the one we are all looking forward to, at least for our posterity, if not for us oldie people like us, me at least. And that's what I think
Indy,
it's like.
Indeed, that's a pretty cool answer, I have to say, and I really like that. And I think hopefully reduced cost of living will resonate with all of our audience, particularly after the last year of spiraling inflation. But I think that was a lovely way to close our show today, Indy. And I just wanted to thank you for your time. We've really enjoyed hearing your story. It's fascinating. Really enjoyed hearing about your platform and your business. Wishing you every success. That's equally fascinating, and I think you're going to smash it. Where is the best place, Indy, for our listeners to find out more about you, contact you, and find out more about your business and your platform? We do.
Well, go to wedo.ai. and check us out. You can download the app. We're still building it, but we have beta users, so you're welcome to download the app. And yeah, LinkedIn, Indiana Gregg. You can just Google. There's not that many Indiana Greggs in the world. I think I'm the only one, except for a little girl in Australia who puts two N's in her name. I'm not her. But yeah, there's only one of me, so I'm easy to find, and I don't hide. So it's and anyone who would like to partner with us or work with us, of course, I'm constantly looking for partnerships and people we can help with this technology. So, and I'm really grateful that you've had me on here, Connor. It's been a real pleasure.
I've really enjoyed it, and my pleasure to you, Indy. So we're wishing you a great day ahead, Indy. We'll keep in touch, and thanks again for your time. That was great.
Thank you.